Good morning. I appreciate the chance to be with you all this morning, and I hope what we think about together will be of interest. It dovetails pretty nicely with what Stephen said and Nuri's reading. As I considered what to talk about this morning, numerous things came to mind. The many conversations I've been part of this fall have left me hungry for more dialogue about issues big and small, about how we can celebrate life in the face of death, about how we can talk about race and class and gender at Brooks in ways that equip us to do that better out in the world, and about how to live with empathy and to engage not only with one another, but with the broken and often scary world beyond our walls. An issue that seems to be all over the place, and obviously is the subject of our chapel this morning, and one that we perhaps have gotten a little sick of hearing about, is leadership. My guess is that all your lives you've heard something about leadership, the need to be a leader. In school, in business, in sports, as well as in politics, we all tend to focus on leaders. Everyone in this room has heard of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. How many, besides a few diehard Patriots fans, perhaps, could identify Joe Cardona? Everyone in this room has heard of Steve Jobs. How many, except maybe Shane Kanakaratney, could identify Apple co-founder Ronald Wayne? I guess I'm a little concerned about our focus, even our obsession with leadership. So I'd like to think with you a little bit about what that means, and maybe the flip side of that. So as usual, when I need advice on things, I turn to my advisees. I asked that impressive group what came to mind when they heard the word leader. Now, I wasn't surprised by most of the responses. A charismatic person leading individuals toward a common goal. Someone who sets the bar for other people and leads them to it. Someone you look to for guidance when needed. A person who stands up for the people he or she is in charge of taking care of. Someone who goes out of their way to make themselves and the people around them better. A role model who gives advice when needed and is courageous. A strong, silent type who leads by example, not through commanding others. One who can acquire respect without fear, who does before they ask or tell, one who can bring a group of people together no matter the circumstances. Now, all of these descriptions focus rightly on the qualities the leader, him or herself, brings to the table. It's also interesting that each of these descriptions implies positive leadership. But another definition has always stayed with me. It was my mother's definition, just slightly different from each of these. She was fond of saying, a leader is someone who has followers. Period. This definition places the focus not so much on the leader's qualities as on results. And obviously, a leader by this definition doesn't necessarily lead in a positive direction, right? Hitler had plenty of followers. In Hitler's case, or in that of the mean girl, or the playground bully, or the gang leader, or Macbeth, people follow simply out of fear. So all leaders, even if they're successful in having followers, aren't necessarily worth following. In a perfect world, of course, only leaders worth following, those who serve the needs of other people, the servant leaders that Stephen was talking about, those who have noble goals and lead by example, would have followers. But we know this isn't the case. We all know examples, perhaps less dramatic than Hitler, of people who rise to a leadership position for the wrong reasons. Think of a time you yielded to the pressure of someone's negative suggestion in a way you later regretted. We've all been there. But no one can lead if others don't follow. In Herman Melville's novel Moby Dick, as Matt Nightingale can tell you, the narrator and main character Ishmael realizes that in going to sea as a sailor on a whaling ship, he must surrender a portion of his freedom to the officers of the ship, and particularly a captain named Ahab. Much of the book is about how Ishmael comes to grips with being a virtual slave to a man obsessed by a single idea: to kill this white whale named Moby Dick. One of Ishmael's insights in the process is that we can't all be captains, at least not all the time. We are all controlled by or subject to or indebted to others in some way all the time. To live well, we must accept the notion that much of the time we're going to be followers. Yet that notion doesn't sit well with most of us. We want to be in the driver's seat. We want to call the shots. But if my mother and Ishmael are correct, we have to accept that forward movement in life depends not just upon good leaders, but upon good followers. So what is a follower? Again, I turn to my ever so wise advisees. Here's what they said about following, much of it negative. Follower is someone who decides to follow the work of others, does not have their own opinions. Someone who goes with the flow and doesn't question the direction they're going in. Someone who doesn't lead, who doesn't have their own thoughts about what to do and where to go, who depends only on others. Someone who doesn't do what they want to do, but only what others do. Following is generally for the less courageous. Someone who doesn't have their own ideas or doesn't share them. Only 4 had anything positive or vaguely positive to say about following. Someone who respects and carries out the actions of the leader. Someone who believes in someone or their practices to the point of supporting or maybe even acting or doing as they do. An essential part of a group or society, usually the majority of the population. Someone who is part of a group of people with a goal, but simply isn't the head of the group. And then there was one outlier, Joe Berberian. A follower is someone who wears flannels and work boots. You're supposed to laugh. That was the joke in my talk. Thanks, Joe. So what are we going to take away from this? Most of us will spend most of our lives following in some way or another. What does it mean then to follow well? In my advisees' negative comments about followers, a common theme emerges. They are all about those who don't have their own opinion, who don't question, who don't have their own thoughts, who do only what others do or lack courage. In the positive comments, one stands out to me. It was Michael Flanagan. His idea was that a follower is part of a group with a goal, but simply isn't the head of the group. I like this idea. Though following can be seen as something weak and passive, it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be. Good followers have ideas and opinions and seek out leaders who share them, lending their voices and talents to strengthen the leader's position and influence. Think about that famous quotation widely attributed to the 18th century philosopher Edmund Burke. He probably didn't write it, but the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. In other words, the triumph of good depends upon us, the followers. If we sit on the sidelines of life, bored and indifferent, we help fulfill that awful prophecy in William Butler Yeats's poem, The Second Coming, where the best lack all conviction, but the worst are full of passionate intensity. Being a good follower connects us to others. It begins with being aware of our surroundings, of paying attention to the issues at school and in the nation and in the world that matter. It begins with joining a club or an organization or showing up to a courageous conversation about Omarina's poem in the Dulcimer Room, or asking questions when we hear someone say something we don't understand or feel uncomfortable about. Put simply, being a good follower is being engaged. When we engage with people and ideas, we feel part of something larger than ourselves, and we begin to see more clearly that the world doesn't revolve around us alone. The more aware and engaged we are, the better we're able to understand what really matters to us and which leaders we really want to follow. As we engage, our moral compasses find their direction and hopefully point us toward the good, not only for us personally, but for the communities of which we are a part. Good followers create good leaders, because if we're following well, only the best leaders, the servant leaders, will have anyone behind them. Now, I know all this is idealistic, but I'm optimistic when it comes to this community. I believe that we have faith in the process of dialogue, that we have faith in engagement. We must have faith in that, because there's really no alternative. We will rarely find easy, final answers to any of the things that challenge us. Progress, good following, and good leading comes only as we are willing to trust the process of thinking hard, listening well, and standing up for what we believe without demonizing those who disagree with us. And I'm excited to be part of that kind of community. Thank you.